Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the regular meeting of the Select Board for November 4th, 2025. First order of business is going into executive session. I move that the Select Board go into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy related to the litigation matter identified in item 2, discussing strategy related to the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property identified in item 3, and approving executive session minutes. The litigation matter and the real property matter must be discussed in executive session because an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation or negotiating position of the town, and the chair so declares an executive session therefore be necessary. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We will return to open session after our executive session meeting. Thank you.
Excellent. One.
Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the regular meeting of the Select Board for November 4th, 2025. I'd like to sort of move the agenda around a little bit to accommodate the Park and Recreation Commission, who's going to present a report on our open space plan. And so therefore, I'd like to give them the opportunity to speak now so they can get to another meeting that they have to go to. And then we'll get to our public comment, board comments, and miscellaneous items. So.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm just going to pull up the slides here. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alexandra Vecchio, Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources for the town of Brookline. I'm thrilled to be here this evening to share the 2025 Open Space and Recreation Plan with you all. Our division really considers this one of our 2 guiding documents for the work that we do. So very excited to have the opportunity to work on it right as our division was created. So this is Brookline's 9th open space and recreation plan. And while I'm probably a little bit biased, I do think it's the best one yet. It really does reflect the town's diverse open space assets, its complex needs, and also includes extensive input from the community on Brookline's open space and recreation goals for the next decade, as this is a 10-year plan. So before we jump into the presentation, I do want to take a moment and just acknowledge the hard work and countless hours that went into creating the document in front of you all this evening. The Open Space and Recreation Plan is developed by a committee that's made up of representatives from over 15 different boards and commissions in Brookline. And those boards all intersect with the goals that are outlined in this plan, which I think really speaks to how interdisciplinary and multifaceted the plan is. The committee that developed the plan was co-chaired by Marcus Quigley, who serves as chair of the Conservation Commission, who's here with us this evening, and Select Board member John Van Scoyac over an 18-month period. So Chairman Quigley will speak more about the work of the committee, but I do want to express my deep appreciation to Chairman Quigley and Select Board member Van Scoyac for their participation and leadership, as well as my gratitude to all the members of the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee for their many hours over the past year and a half. I also want to acknowledge the Conservation Commission members who helped to draft and review a lot of the content in the plan. Several of those folks are here in the room with us this evening. And I'll just say that Brookline is extraordinarily lucky to have such a dedicated group of environmental stewards that are protecting Brookline's natural resources. It's a true pleasure to get to work with them on this and so many of our other conservation projects. Finally, I am so appreciative of the many staff who put time into creating this plan, but I do specifically want to thank our Conservation and Sustainability Assistant, Rebecca Manley, and our Conservation and Natural Resources Manager, Alex Cassie. This plan wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the 2 of them. So Alex, who you'll hear from shortly, had the very fun and not at all stressful job of stepping into his new job. He replaced Tom Brady as our conservation administrator right after we kicked off the start of this plan. So he had to really hit the ground running and dig into things pretty quickly in his new role. So the document before you is really thoughtful. It's inclusive of the feedback we heard from the community. It's well organized and it's well designed for staff to collectively execute upon it, which I think is really important with such a comprehensive plan that touches so many different facets of what we do as a town. But I can assure you none of that would be feasible if it wasn't for Alex's organization, dedication, and general collaborative approach as the project manager. So I want to commend him for his extraordinary work on this project. And I also just want to acknowledge my deep appreciation for everything he does for the town, but specifically as my co-pilot of the sustainability division, whether he wants to be that or not. Alex was the first person I had the pleasure of hiring when I started in this new position. So anything that the division has accomplished over the past year wouldn't have been possible without Alex. And he is the person that I often describe as the truest example of a dedicated public steward and someone that we all aspire to be, myself included. So thank you, Alex. So this evening, our goal is really to share with you all the great work that went into developing this document, talk a little bit about the purpose of an open space plan for our community and why it's important, and then highlight some of the content and top priorities identified in the plan. As we know, the implementation of the open space and recreation plan is one of the board's fiscal year 27 goals. At the end of the presentation, we are seeking a vote from the board to adopt the plan and issue a letter of support that will be included in the final document that we share with the state and then post online as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Chairman.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Alexandra. I don't believe that a vote was on the agenda.
Second. So there is.
And my concern is that I'd like to make sure the board has sufficient time to fully read and understand and absorb
Yeah.
what's
So
in this plan.
there is a memo in there requesting a vote and the draft letter in there, but obviously if the board isn't ready to vote tonight, we can bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, it's not going to create a problem for you.
Nope, nope. We just need to submit it to the state by the end of the year, but
Okay.
yep. It can definitely wait till the next meeting for the actual vote. Great. So thank you so much. With that, I will pass things over to co-chair of the Open Space Plan Committee, Chairman Marcus Quigley. Thank you all.
Thanks, Alexandra, and thank you for the board for having us this evening. This is an incredibly well thought out piece of work that the town has put together. I think of all of the things that I've been involved in, this is one of the most collaborative efforts that the town engages in. We had 17 different committees participating, and as chair, and as John knows, thank you, John, for all of your participation. It's a lot to bring everyone together, to bring the community together and collect all the information. As you'll see, and Alex will go through the process, we talked to the public, we brought in the different stakeholders, heard what people have said, conducted surveys, and brought all of that together. One of the things you'll know from the past is that we have had award-winning plans before. It would have been very easy for us to go through the motions, conduct the process. One of the things that is stunning about this year's proposed plan is that we have stepped it up an entirely additional notch. This plan is creative, it's thoughtful, it's fresh, it's inclusive, and it has really expanded, I think, what we even thought was able to be achieved as part of the process. And I think that speaks to everyone's hard work. I counted 21 staff have participated in the process, and it's really been quite a labor of love and effort. So I think you'll be very excited when you get time to read through the document. It's pretty lengthy, but there is a lot of change, and I think, as I said, thoughtfulness. So we're looking forward to a vote from the board to support this document. And yeah, we'd love to hear from Alex as well on the details. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is, I'm Alex Cassie. I'm the Conservation and Natural Resources Manager for the town of Brookline, and was the project manager for the Open Space and Recreation Plan 2025 update. To give you an idea, you know, we've spoken sort of anecdotally about the size of this committee and the amount of staff input we've had here. This was our committee on the left, as well as the folks that gave a high level and comprehensive staff input to this plan. Dozens of folks were, you know, willing to give their input in addition to the comprehensive public feedback we got from this. And we're really excited to be able to take sort of everyone's acumen into the mix and be able to try to put together a plan that really approached open space from a comprehensive town-wide perspective, and not just from our perspective in parks and open space and sustainability and natural resources and Department of Public Works. Looking ahead at our, you know, full sort of 18-month process of review here, between 3 public listening sessions, 23 public meetings with committees and subcommittees. The goal was to leave no stone unturned to make sure that no one was unheard and that we were able to take as much feedback as possible and really develop this into the best plan possible. So looking at what an open space and recreation plan is and really the purpose of this, you know, there are certainly a lot of municipal plans in town, but an open space and recreation plan has very specific guidelines and a very specific requirements and serves a very specific purpose. One of those main purposes, if not the main purpose, is it allows a municipality to qualify for certain local, state, and federal grants. These can include land, water, conservation fund grants, land grants, park grants. It can even help in local CPA grants. In the renovations and updates to parks like Cypress and Amory and Downs, you know, happened with assistance from funds from Land Water Conservation Fund. Projects at Sewell Recreation and Skyline happened with assistance from land and park grants, which assist with active and passive recreation opportunities. But in addition to the nuts and bolts funding opportunities and support we have from those grants, really having this plan provides this cohesive reference of assets for staff to use, for residents to use, for boards and commissions to use. So when someone has a question about what's at Amory Playground, or what sort of facilities and what is the size of a certain nature sanctuary, or what is the protection status of a certain playground, this is our go-to reference for everyone that's interested in this to have. And in this process, went through those tooth and nail and made sure the accuracy was there, the updated images were there, and that this can be the go-to resource moving forward. In addition to providing that sort of, encyclopedic resource, this is a document that directly identifies and advocates for community open space needs, starting at the public input level with surveys and public listening sessions, but also with our board and commission representatives, having all of those folks at the table to say, this is what folks in Brookline are looking for, and to be able to identify ways to meet those needs, to be able to generate goals and objectives that can turn into measurable, quantifiable actions that we can take over the next 10 years to try to address those needs. The community vision statement is something that's required in every open space and recreation plan. And there's some guidance from the state in what that looks like. And for a long time, the community vision statement in our open space and recreation plans was mostly unchanged. Our committee specifically wanted to make sure we changed that and said, yes, there's a lot of merit here, but we feel like this needs a fresh start and a fresh set of eyes. And so rather than update our community vision, our committee started a completely new subcommittee to rewrite this from the ground up. So it was from a blank sheet of paper, rewriting the community vision based specifically on all of the public feedback that we got. And I won't read this out aloud to you here, but these are the major beats that were pulled from that community vision statement. And I would encourage everyone to fully read that section, because it is a great sort of microcosm that shows the enthusiasm and the passion the folks at Brookline have for their open space, and also really speaks to a lofty vision for what that open space and what that connectivity and what that version of Brookline can be in 2035 and 2075 and 2175. So it's a really sort of inspiring document. And I was thrilled when the committee members, outside of any recommendation by me, said we should rewrite this and make sure that it reflects the desires of Brookline. So this plan at 275 pages has a lot of information in it. We focused primarily on 3 subcommittees that looked at a lot of this information. That was greenways and transportation, the ways that open space connect to one another, infrastructure and resource protection. How do we protect the open space assets that we have? And then including zoning, infrastructure, changes to be the laws and bylaws, or to the physical or natural infrastructure we have in our spaces. As you read through the plan, you find background on community setting and environmental resources, which we were so fortunate to have our experienced Conservation Commission go through with a fine-tooth comb and update. We have a comprehensive inventory of the open space assets, which I mentioned before, and then starting with a identification and analysis of community needs that builds into goals, objectives, and measurable actions. It also includes additional resources such as maps. We sort of went through all, I think, 25 or so maps that we have in this plan and updated them with current resources, as well as taking into account edits and recommendations that our committee members had to those maps. To give you an idea of what our visual update looks like on this plan, on the left, you see our 2018 plan versus our 2025 plan. So the goal here was not just a visual update. The goal was to make this a usable document. The last thing you want with one of these plans is for it to sit on a dusty library shelf and have no one actually engage with it. We want to make sure that, again, it's usable by staff and it's usable by boards and commissions, but it should be usable by everyone and should be an engaging sort of visual document that's easy to interact with and has all the information in the right place. We were able to cut out some information we found was redundant, but also actually include a few other metrics that were helpful for staff to be able to reference. You know, I had times when I worked for Parks and Open Space when I would look at the open space plan and say, man, why is that in there? And fortunately, I was able to remedy some of those by including a few other metrics in the data here. And then again, looking ahead at just a visual reimagining of an action plan. While the previous action plans were really helpful in helping us organize, by reconfiguring it a bit, we were able to not only come up with sort of a punchier visual, but really a more functional document. And we're able to include additional metrics not required by the state, such as our own staff capacity to do things. And it just helps for a more organized flow of the information. So in constructing an action plan, starting with a sort of lofty community vision, building that into a needs analysis, building that into goals and objectives, and finally ending with quantifiable action items. One of the things the state asks you to do is classify this by certain priorities. And we wanted to make sure we were bracketing things into, buckets that made sense for the town. And so we have in our action plan, we have things that are listed as priority 1, 2, and 3. Now that's not to say that, items under priority 2 and 3 aren't important. Everything that's in this plan is something we feel has merit and we want to explore and achieve over the 10 years of this plan. But I wanted to take a minute to focus on our priority 1 items. These are items that we went through at a committee level and at a staff level and identified as vital to achieving the community vision that was identified in this plan. And as you'll see, there's not a ton of them. There's about 12 or 13 of these priority 1 items, but they're big ones. And a lot of them, have ongoing, they're going to be an ongoing thing. It's going to take not only 10 years, but beyond that. But our, charge here is to make sure that these are progressing. And if we look at think of those priority 1 items, the major themes that come up are to acquire, develop additional open space, tree canopy, and greenways, and to increase collaboration between apartments on open space planning and projects. One of the great things about an open space plan is it talks about what can happen with your open space. And we're pretty lucky in Brookline in that we have a lot of different plans. And we wanted to make an open space plan that would fill in the cracks for things that aren't identified in other plans, but also really stress the importance of working with different departments, working collaboratively on shared vision, working with within the comprehensive plan, working with the climate action and resiliency plan, working with the Parks and Open Space strategic master plan, and finding ways to have all these plans connect and support one another. Looking forward to next steps, once, should the plan be approved by select board, we would need our final approval by the Massachusetts Division of Conservation Services. They've given us sort of a pre-approval. It's sort of an unofficial, looks good, and let us know when everything's signed off. Then we would publish and distribute and begin implementation planning. Some of our pre-implementation planning is happening right now as we work toward, an ambitious 10-year plan. And then I would give 6-month implementation updates at Conservation Commission meetings, with the goal of specifically for priority 1 items, having some sort of actionable or measurable result in those 6-month increments on those priority 1 items. We're hoping to be as transparent and engaged and present as possible with our information here to make sure that, as one of the major charges of our division, that this plan is front and foremost, and that folks are welcome to engage with us directly, and we want to share our achievements as we move forward. So that was kind of a fast overview of everything we've done in the open space plan for a pretty significant large document. So I wanted to allow time for questions from our end.
So any questions from the select board? Paul?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for all the work. Thank you for the committee and those who are not here. So I just wanted to make sure there's a link in your letter, the memo that takes us to the website with
Mhm.
the report. It's drafted, it says it's a draft version, September 16th. Is that the most recent version if we wanted to dig into the report?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
I have a question. Many years ago, when I worked on the open space plan, an issue came up with respect to Land and Water Conservation Fund funding of various parcels here in Brookline. Is it in the plan? And I've not read it.
Okay.
I did not go to that link.
Sure.
In the plan, is there a easily accessible list of parcels that are subject to Article 97, of course, but also land and water conservation restrictions?
Sure. So if you in the asset inventory under each of those properties, we have a specific protection field under each of those, which will list whether it's something that's on a National Historic Registry, a local registry, Article 97, LWCF, whatever level of protection they have, and that was recently reviewed and updated in the last year.
Great, thank you. Michael.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the committee members who put together this really great document. I've read some of it, but not all of it. And I'm particularly interested if you could dive a little deeper into the goals around acquisition of open space.
Sure.
Both in terms of the decision-making processes that you are thinking about in terms of what kinds of open space need to be acquired, as well as the opportunities for whether it's funding or other methods of acquisition, and how you prioritize those over the 10-year period of the plan.
Sure. That's a great question. I think one of the things that we want to avoid with any of these planning efforts is we don't want to plan them in a vacuum. We know that there are other efforts by community planning and development to look at acquisition and priority acquisition, and we want to collaborate as much as possible at a departmental level, and then communicating with boards as well. So for something as complicated as open space acquisition, is something that's going to start with conversations this winter with community planning and development staff. I believe they've been working already at a staff level looking at some progress in terms of the potential for conservation restrictions, the potential for priority parcels. So it's really going to start with sort of a conversation and looking at established maps of what's there and what would be priorities to meet our goals with open space, whether that's large space that we can get conservation and recreation values for, whether that is the opportunity to obtain a conservation restriction that could create an additional greenway or habitat corridor, and just looking at things from as many perspectives as possible. And then using this open space plan and using our collaborative knowledge as different town departments to identify what are the things we want to actively pursue, and how do we go about establishing the funding, whether that's CPR or whether that's working with a land bank, or whether that's any number of avenues to try to start building the tools to plan for this. Because while it might not be available tomorrow, if something becomes available or there's an opportunity in 2027 or 2030 or 2032, we want to be ready to act on that and have all the tools in place to move forward.
Thank you.
Oh,
Another question. So I'm fascinated by I'm sorry I didn't dig into this beforehand. I'm fascinated by the inventory and the very small parcels that we have up to very large parcels. Even you're counting every rotary and spit of land, which is fascinating to me. I really appreciate that. One in particular kind of jumped out at me, the Newton Street parcel, which looks like it's fenced off and not accessible. It's a 0.11 acres. And it is from a time when the Putterham School was there, or something was moved. And how do we make spaces like this available and accessible? If this one looks like this one is not accessible, today.
So somehow, when it comes to some of the open space is complicated because it's sort of owned and controlled by different agencies and they have different access and different availability. And I think one of the things to look at is, looking at, is there a potential for connectivity in these small spaces? Is there room for, maybe if it isn't access, is there room for protection or enhancement of those spaces? One of the things that we looked at in the open space plan as you get down into our priority 2 and 3 items are there's not always going to be an opportunity to acquire a certain property, but we want to make sure that we're building tools for folks to enhance the open space value of those spaces, or at minimum be able to sort of increase that.
Well, I guess, one of the things that we've heard and we continue to hear with our community engagement around the comprehensive plan is access to green space. We've heard more playing fields, but just passive sitting in a quiet spot that's green.
Sure.
Especially in North Brookline, they're few and far between. And so, opportunities to open up space that we have that's underutilized or not utilized at all, or encouraging folks they have a parcel next to an extra lot, to encourage them to donate that or grant it to the town or sell it to the town would be really helpful.
And we've been working on some of our actions and goals specifically around conservation restrictions and additional, at the commission level, a plan to work on additional education and resources to promote exactly that. Some folks might not even know that's an option, and whether that's just a protected space for the future or whether that might have access arrangement or to be able to start potentially growing folks' access to public open space is something we're really interested in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John.
I want to thank those who spoke for some very kind words. And before people get the wrong impression, to be a member of this process was a privilege, and it would not have been possible for people such as myself to make contributions in a meaningful way if not for the really remarkable support that we had every step of the way. And it was more than support, it was leadership from the staff in Brookline's various departments, and three of whom you've heard from tonight, Marcus being a volunteer head of the Conservation Commission. So that being said, I just want to give people listening to this tonight a little bit of perspective on this, because sort of from the point of view of someone who wasn't sure, what part he could play in all of this, wasn't sure exactly what the whole history of this was, why we were doing what we were doing. When you wrap your mind around this, you come away with a very good impression, not just of Brookline, but of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. If you haven't already figured it out, this is a state-driven process. We have this plan because if we want to apply for state conservation or open space acquisition or recreation grants, it's required that you have a plan. That's a good thing. If the state's going to dispense monies to cities and towns for the purpose of increasing the inventory of open space in the Commonwealth as a whole, they have to have some kind of reassurance that people at the local level have a plan for how they're going to spend that money and that the plan makes sense. So there has been well-established this tradition of every 7 years, first of all, there has to be an open space and recreation plan at the local level. Second of all, there has to be an update of it every 7 years. And in the process of updating this plan, we brought on for the first time a sustainability director. We saw the departure of a veteran member of the department, that Tom Brady, who had been the one leading the process of updating the plan. And I'm sure there were other changes along the way. And then at the end of the process, very near the end of the process, we heard from the state that they wanted it to be not a 7-year plan, but a 10-year plan. So that was fun. We weathered all of that. And
I'm going to make perhaps, I don't know if it's a surprise proposal or one that we can't really accommodate. But what are the plans that we have for distribution of printed versions of this? Does anybody have that answer right at this moment?
So the plan is to sort of, historically, we've printed about 100 copies of this. We've
Yeah.
provided them to the committee members. We've provided them to public buildings and public libraries and make them available at the Public Works Department, should people want to review them. Our plan is to reduce that a little bit, just given
Yeah.
the amount. So we'd likely make around 50 copies of this that would be distributed to the committee and would be available at, public buildings and resources.
And from the library, I assume?
Yeah.
And so on. Okay, so far be it from me to propose something that's going to add to our printing costs, in the next annual budget. So I won't do that, but what I will do is picking up on what was just said, if in the near future we have copies of this available for perusal, at Town Hall, for borrowing from the library, it's a really astonishing document in terms of its breadth, in terms of what you learn about Brookline, what you learn about the process of land conservation and protection of our natural resources. And there's some beautiful photography in this document. So a lot of people, they don't really appreciate a picture or a document until it's in their hands, and they get a chance to kind of thumb through it. So I hope we have, enough copies of that nature so that people whose preferred way of learning all of these wonderful things would be to just sort of hold it in their hands and take a look at those wonderful photographs as well. So thanks for the opportunity that I had to work with you folks. And thanks for delivering such a terrific product on behalf of the town of Brookline. If the state doesn't approve this, they're crazy, and I'm sure they will, because this really rises to the challenge that we were presented with.
Nice. Well, I appreciate the kind words. And I will say, we heard from Alexandra and Marcus, but just from my piece, being able to work with this really engaged, the Conservation Commission here, we're so,
Yeah.
blessed for them to be here in person tonight to support this, but also, that committee of 17 boards and commissions and community organizations that came to dozens of meetings to work on this. And it was just a really fortunate opportunity for me to be engaged in this as well.
And
So,
a lot of it in person.
Well,
Happy to-
yes.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. And as I said, next week, presumably we will vote on.
Week after next.
Week after next?
Next week is a holiday.
Oh.
and if there's any additional information needed from us, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I forgot about that holidays.
Yeah.
Not on a Monday, it's on a Tuesday.
And then town meeting.
Pardon me?
And then the next week is the
Town-
first day of
town
town
meeting.
meeting.
Yes.
You'll have the opportunity to vote.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning and start off with select board announcements and updates. And I have a few announcements to start off with. Let's see, what should go first? Well, let me start off with the Pierce geothermal well. I just want to announce that beginning on November 17, that project will begin. The noisy part of it probably starts in January of 2026. And will continue through the summer. But if you're interested, or if you're a neighbor of the Pierce Park playground area, there are documents on the website of the Pierce School Building Committee that can give you information on the details of what's going to happen and when. But it's starting starting this month, so be aware. Next, I'd like to announce something about an event, the Changing of the Bard. Brookline Poet Laureate Brookline Poet Laureate Allison Adair, newly appointed, is being celebrated at Brookline Booksmith on, the date is not in this announcement. This Friday, okay. At Brookline Booksmith to celebrate Brookline's new poet laureate, Allison Adair. And as a bonus, The event will include readings from Allison, outgoing poet laureate Jennifer Barber, past poet laureates Judith Steinberg, Jan Schreiber, and Zvi Sussling. So it should be an exciting and intellectually exhilarating event this Friday at what time? 7 p.m. Brookline Booksmith. Finally, and before I read this announcement, I want to thank the many residents who spoke at last week's meeting on the license plate reader proposal and the MOU related to that. They provided the select board with information on block security or block safety and the general use of license plate readers, which I found very, very helpful. But as a result, Chestnut Hill Realty sent to members of the select board the following announcement. Chestnut Hill Realty appreciates the feedback from the Brookline Select Board and members of the community regarding our planned installation of flock safety cameras on Independence Drive in South Brookline. In response to this input, we have decided to place the installation on hold for now. No cameras have been installed or activated, thus no data is being collected or shared. So thank you to Chestnut Hill Realty for that decision. And that's those are my announcements. Any other announcements? Paul?
I just wanted, I know we got a full agenda, but I wanted to mention this for those that have a child once in their life. You know the importance of Halloween and the joy that it brings. Nobody does Halloween better than Brookline, in my experience. Amy and I took our children over to the Tuxteth neighborhood, and it was just incredible. And I know that a number of neighborhoods do this. The amount of investment in time and energy, and the caring that they put into it, and the joy that they bring to kids, from people, you know, ring the bell and look up and they're dropping candy out the third floor window to incredible displays, artistic displays and creative displays. I know that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids in Brookline and adults really enjoy Halloween in Brookline and the incredible job that many of the neighborhoods do. So I just want to thank them. If you participated in that, if you helped contribute to the joy of kids and adults being able to get out and see neighbors and do trick or treat, it is a very special experience in Brookline to be able to participate in that. So
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you. I just wanted to announce on behalf of the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance and the Town Meeting Members Association that there is an upcoming warrant article review on Thursday, November 13th in the Select Board's hearing room, which is right here. Refreshments will be available at 6:30 and the program will start at 7:00 p.m. And articles to be presented in detail include Article 7, which is the Clark Road zoning, and Article 8, which has to do with nuisance lighting, while articles to be briefly reviewed include Article 9, the Renter's Handbook, Article 13, the resolution on consideration of the needs of older adult populations in decisions on the Fisher Hill town-owned property, and Article 17, the resolution on tree protection. So I encourage town meeting members and other concerned citizens to join the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance and the TMMA that evening on November 13th.
Great, thank you. John?
Thank you. I just want to say a few words in support of, or in recognition of an organization that I think a lot of people have heard of, maybe some have not. Mothers Out Front, Brookline chapter, is the organization I'm referring to. And that they sponsored something today, which was, very typical of their activities. It was a chance to hear from Senator Michael Barrett on the kind of crucial point that we are at right now in terms of legislating to advance the cause of addressing climate change. We clearly have some headwinds in Washington, D.C. There's been some delays along the way in achieving goals, the ambitious goals that were set for example, in Brookline, but also, at the state level by the state legislature. The message from Senator Michael Barrett couldn't have been more clear. And Mothers Out Front deserves credit for highlighting it and for working with him to push forward despite the headwinds, despite the fact that we have had to change our goals a little bit and extend them out a little bit. But the cause is as important as ever. It is in front of us as much as ever. Witness, the damaging effects of climate change that were evident just within the past week in the hurricane that devastated the Caribbean. And there will be an agenda, and Governor Healy is very much, involved in laying it out for Massachusetts going forward. And it's an agenda to, as much as possible, pull back on use of fossil fuels, as much as possible, advance the use of clean energy. Senator Barrett is key, and Mothers Out Front should pay attention to, and they can find out more by just visiting the Mothers Out Front website.
Thank you, John. David.
It was referenced moments ago that we don't have a meeting next week because of a holiday. That holiday is, of course, Veterans Day, and Brookline commemorates Veterans Day every year by a program that Bill McGroarty, the Director of Veteran Services, puts together. Many select board members and other town officials typically attend. Veterans are routinely honored and give very inspiring speeches. Typically, the portion of Washington Street right across from Town Hall is closed off to traffic to accommodate anyone who would like to comfortably then following the ceremony, which lasts for meet our local veterans.
Thank you. Any other comments or updates? Okay, let's move on to public comment. Charlie, did you set this up?
I will, Bernard, although I'm want to warn you that we are seeing your feed drop again, as we did last week. It's intermittent at this point, and Big is looking at it, but I will start reading the public comment rules. If I freeze up, you'll just have to let me know as soon as you are back online, okay?
Okay.
Thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once 15 minutes has been met, there is an opportunity at the conclusion of Select Board's business for additional comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. The on-screen timer will flash orange when you have 1 minute remaining and red when your time is nearly up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you are welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Any person wishing to speak must begin their comment by identifying themselves with their full name, either their Brookline precinct number or street address, and the specific topic on which they wish to speak. The board encourages but does not require that remote users turn on their videos when commenting. The first person signed up for public comment is Yuta Friedrich, who's online. Yuta, I'm promoting you now. And when you are ready, your 3 minutes will begin.
Okay, I'm ready. Thank you, the select board members and also the community of Brookline for having me. My name is Jutta Friedrichs. I'm a co-founder of SUFA. We provide and operate the solar powered signage around your town. And I was very happy to hear the open space planning presentation today. A lot of items really resonated with us. And I would like to make a small announcement here, which for us, it's really been a huge announcement. We've been waiting for working very tightly with e-ink over the last several years, and we are finally launching a 75-inch color displays, which we are really hoping to utilize to engage the local businesses and also local residents to really shape the new solar-powered public signage. We've greatly enjoyed working with the town of Brookline over the past few years. We started just prior COVID.
Could you go back and repeat what you said?
Solar powered.
Beginning with the
solar
core
power.
powered panels, we lost.
We're having technical difficulties here.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so our signage is completely 100% solar powered. We are the only 100% solar powered provider, a signage provider out there. It's also not backlit and it's very sunlight readable. So the values that have been presented over the course of this meeting really resonate with us, SUFA, Cambridge-based company, as we care deeply about the sustainability aspect and healthy living environments. And we are really looking forward to switching out some of those black and white signs that we have seen in your town for a new, larger 75-inch color display. And hopefully we're going to be able to integrate those into the open space initiatives, as we could use them to really foster interactivity, gather feedback, communicate events. Our platform provides real-time updates. We can do polls and so forth. And we have been really impressed in the past with how engaged local residents have been. In Brookline, I was there personally at several of the installations and spoke with several curious residents who engaged, asked questions and had opinions. And those opinions have really shaped what SUFA is today and what SUFA will be now that we are launching a completely revamped product that hopefully will be much more engaging moving forward. And we are looking to continue our partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. There's no one else signed up for public comment, Bernard. So folks in the audience can raise their hand in the room or use the hand raise feature online to let us know that they'd like to speak. We have 21 participants online and no one is indicating that they'd like to speak.
Okay, we'll close public comment and move on to our miscellaneous agenda. I'd like to move approval in omnibus fashion of items 7A through 7F, unless, of course, someone wants to pull something out and have a discussion of it. Seeing none. All in favor of items 7A through 7F, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, our main calendar. We've already heard from the Open Space and Recreation about the Open Space and Recreation Plan. Next, digital community display. Our communications officer, Christina Metcalf, is going to make a presentation on this.
Good evening. My name is Christina Metcalf. I am the communications officer.
Could you speak closer to the mic?
I am the communications officer for the town of Brookline, and I'm here tonight to talk to you about the digital displays in Brookline. Just give me one moment. I will pull up a presentation. So tonight, we're just going to review what we currently have, present different options that we have moving forward, and hopefully at the end get a sense of the direction that the board wants to move in after we discuss all the options. Just a little bit of background, SUFA was installed in 2019. We have a total of 23 locations around town. They are 100% solar powered, wireless. There's no electricity running through that, and they're e-ink, so there is no light pollution. It is managed by a customer management service. So on the back end, multiple departments have access to Post, as well as myself, and I assist in community and nonprofit groups posting to that as well for events which are allowed. Businesses are also able to submit ads through that as well. 20% of the airtime is reserved for town messaging, as I just mentioned, through departments and nonprofit and community groups. The maintenance and ownership is handled by SUFA. It is installed with 4 anchor bolts. There's no trenching or power hookup required. Like I said, the history, it was installed in 2019. We have since done two new-year renewals in 2021 and 2023. In 2023, there were free ad spots added for those nonprofits and a discounted rate for local businesses. This year, as the contract was coming up to renew, a former town administrator, Tiffany Oliva, and I had discussed that and had let SUFA know that we would not be renewing for the next 2 years. But she and I had worked out a 6-month extension, which will go through the end of April 2026. So like I said, there are also, it is 100% solar powered, no light pollution. There is community engagement possibilities. There are QR codes available, but it's not super activated well. And there has been mixed feedback from the community as well as business owners. The data insights, it is anonymous. It's pedestrian counts only. There's no personal identifiable information that is shared and collected by SUFA. There is no direct cost to the town, and we get 20% revenue share after SUFA recoups their expenses. It's limited interactivity compared to like a full touch kiosk screen that you would see like at a mall or other open outdoor air places. We have to, any content that we create must be optimized so that it has effective contrast. So if there's a light to anything that is put out as a social media post has to be just made sure that it has good contrast. Otherwise, it's hard to see the elements or the information.
Christine, could you put that-
Sure.
You're just gonna go right into the microphone, that's all.
Absolutely. So tonight, there's also the possibility of going for an RFP. And so why consider that? It'll ensure a competitive bidding process will get the best value and transparency. Last time that was not done. So there were other things that we weren't able to consider, and sole source considerations and other things like that. And this will allow the community as well as the board to figure out what is important to the community. Is touchscreen, wayfinding, Wi-Fi, is solar, accessibility integrations, the light impacts, and revenue generation. So decision options and next steps. Today, if you have any feedback, I'm happy to discuss that further with you. So we can continue with SUFA and extend that 6-month contract, issue an RFP, or discontinue this type of service altogether. If we did an RFP, we would ask the board to select somebody from the board to work with myself and somebody from economic development and other business-related boards and committees to develop the RFP, issue that, and then we would work to have that ready by the end of the year and select in early 2026. If you decide to continue with SUFA, we would just review and renegotiate and extend that contract to the normal 2-year cycle. If we discontinue, I would work with SUFA for that communication strategy and site removal logistics as we approach April. So, any questions?
John?
Yes, thanks for the presentation. I just want to get clarification on a couple of points for starters.
Sure.
So the process of issuing an RFP, I'm assuming means that although we don't renew SUFA, they can be an applicant under the RFP that goes out.
Correct.
And basically we can start from scratch.
Yes.
And then any other entities that want to bid or at least respond to the RFP can do that as well.
Yes.
And then we can kind of measure these companies against one another.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm in an interesting position of having been someone who didn't really welcome the arrival of on-street, I'll call them billboards. I know they're not technically, they're not that. They're something, they're quite a bit more than that. But at the same time, I think having been through several years of experience with them, I welcome the fact that we're opening up the process so that we can kind of get a sense of what is the market and what are municipalities being offered in terms of services in return for use of our space. And, maybe I'm just too cynical where these matters are concerned, but I do hope people understand that these are always kind of presented to us as though they are, some kind of a favor to the community to put these helpful billboards around in our public spaces. But there's very much a self-interest on the part of these companies to be the ones who then get the access to the real estate in various municipalities. And then they have a purpose that they hope will someday make them a hot company and, be to their economic benefit to sort of use our space. And not just use our space, but also from our space, gather information, gather data. And we recently witnessed how very, very careful people in Brookline are about corporate entities, large companies, startup companies, you name it, companies, coming into our space in Brookline and using their equipment to gather data. And I think people need to both look at the advantages of these signs and also the reality of what this means to our stake in civil liberties, in privacy, and so on, to get into an arrangement with companies of this nature. So those are the guidelines I'll be following when we assess the results of the RFP. I am in favor of us doing an RFP, and I look forward to seeing what happens in response.
Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. I agree with much of what John said, but I think there's a step that we're skipping. You had mentioned that there were some surveys, there's been feedback. It'd be really helpful to get a data-driven presentation as to how these things have been functioning, how many ads have gone up, how many interactive surveys have been done, what was the feedback, to make a decision about whether this type of service should be on our streets to begin with. There's no real data right now that's in front of us to make that decision. And then if the board decides to issue an RFP, they can issue an RFP. But I think it's important to understand how they actually have been used and what's been the response from the community. So I think I've mentioned the last time, I don't think you were here when the last time the thing was renewed. Maybe you were.
No.
I was against it. I live feet from a couple of these things in St. Mary's. They're not very attractive. I don't think I really ever see anybody standing in front of them to get information. They're just taking up space. And as John said, it's kind of like a billboard. So I never got it. And I do have a lot of concerns about the data that they're collecting. They're saying they're not storing any data. It's just like who's walking by. There's a lot of data that's being captured passively on your phone as you walk by. And it's never been clear to me what that is and how they're clearing it and who could actually, we heard from last week, could someone subpoena that information and tie it back? So it would be helpful to get some additional data before we make a decision about issuing an RFP.
Michael?
I want to second several of the comments Paul made as well as John. I also would hope that if we go through an RFP process that we'll have a set of those questions as part of the RFP in terms of the data that is where that data is being transmitted, how that data is being encrypted, who has access to it, what the security protocols are for the company, et cetera, et cetera. I would also hope that there would be both members of the nonprofit community and the business community who are also part of the evaluation process because their input would be very helpful. One of the things that you mentioned, and this sort of goes along to Paul's comments about needing more information. You mentioned that there's a revenue sharing agreement as part of our current arrangement with SUFA.
Yes.
That is after expenses.
Mhm.
Since I'm not 100% clear as to what their business model or their profit model is, or whether they're making any profit, can you at least give us a sense of the magnitude of the revenue that we have actually earned through this arrangement to date?
I had reached out to SUFA and I hadn't unfortunately gotten clear revenue reports from them. I'm looking into that. I know that in the beginning, for the first 2 years, I think that it was maybe wasn't a very high total, and I think more so recently I don't have that data, so I can look to get that data from SUFA as
I-
well as the security information. I know that there was a during my tenure here, there was an article about that, and was their personal information being captured from SUFAs, and that an article was done by local news, and so I have the answer for that, and they had reached out to us and assured us that no personal identifiable information was being used at the time, but I can get more detail on that for you from them.
So, yes, David.
So even though they may not be SUFA sharing
Mhm.
specific data with
Mhm.
third parties, they do provide a dashboard for advertisers. Isn't that a form of sharing?
I'm not sure exactly what the dashboard that they provide is. They do provide a dashboard for us, and that our staff some of it is not so detailed, and I think that was if I have my cell phone, a work phone, and my watch, that's considered 3, or is that I'm only one person, so is it counting me as 3 or is it counting me as 1? So that's really how sort of basic that data gathering is.
But do you
Right.
know whether the dashboards are going to the advertisers as well?
I do not.
I would imagine that the data is being shared as part of that. But again, the data that's being collected is not any sort of demographic information or anything. It is your phone and any Wi-Fi enabled device you have is regularly checking to see, is there a Wi-Fi network around that I can join? Do I know any of these Wi-Fi networks? And it's regularly pinging that out unless you go into airplane mode and turn Wi-Fi off. What the signs are doing is it's recording that ping back. They
Say they're just picking up pings. I wonder if they can also pick up the IP address of your phone or other computer, for example. It's not going to be an easy thing for us to do because we need really high level technical expertise to identify what the issues are that we need to be checking. David?
I don't know if I fully understood the direction you're going in, Paul, but are you suggesting that perhaps we don't go out for RFP at all?
I'm suggesting that before we issue an RFP, we understand, what did we do? How did it work? What kind of response did we get? I don't know if this is a service that we should continue. I think the board should ask. Like she even raised the question on her presentation. Is this something a service that we want to continue in Brookline? So I think that's a fundamental question. And I think that decision can be data driven, and it can also be, qualitative feedback that we've gotten from staff in the community.
Right, I agree with you because this notion that we would go to an RFP first sort of implies that we want to continue with this.
Yeah, I'm not sure we want to continue.
Well, continue with
Mm.
some type of
Right.
service. I mean, and maybe we don't want any type of service. Michael has. Sorry. Yeah.
A couple of points. Number one is, it would be worthwhile to find out along the lines that you're talking about whether, the businesses and the nonprofits, the town organizations that use this service find it valuable and how they take action based on the information that they get. And also, given that there's data coming back to us, whether it's just pedestrian counts or something else, whether we've actually ever taken any action based on that data, or we're just sort of watching the numbers scroll by, because lots of data gathering, you just look at the numbers and say, oh, that's interesting, and then you sort of move on, and that doesn't have a lot of value for. Agree with you, that is very important. For example, and even with a ping, there is identifiable information that is gathered about the specific, whether you think of it as a serial number or
MAC
something, a MAC number, for that device. And, if I have, for example, a phone and a watch and they're connected by Bluetooth, I have to leave Bluetooth on in order for my devices to talk together. So it's not as easy as telling people like, well, if you're really concerned, you can just turn Bluetooth off. People typically don't do that sort of thing.
Yeah. John.
I appreciate that there are members of the board who are open to the possibility that maybe we don't want to continue a relationship with any of these companies. That's fair game. At the same time, I am well aware that there are people from the business community who are kind of excited about the possibility of improving upon the on-street offerings that we have in terms of, this kind of data that would be, it would not only provide a source of data, but it would also provide a opportunity for some of our local merchants to advertise. And they've been using the current vendor for advertising, and they can speak for themselves as to whether they think they got good results. With an RFP that would attract more than just the current vendor, there might be other options that are seen as advantages by people in the local business community. So before we just, rule out any future relationship with a company of this nature, I'd like to learn more from our business community as to how they use the current vendor and what their view of the possible opportunities in the future are.
Yeah, and John, I think that's what we're all saying, right? That we want information. They've done surveys, they've done metrics, I don't think together collectively, we understand fully what the service offering is and how it's been performing and what the feedback is. So that's all. I think there's a decision, Kate.
Okay, so I think the message from the board is that we need more information. We need a briefing on all the things that we mentioned before we can even make a decision as to whether to continue with any service, continue with this service, or go out for an RFR.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so why don't we plan to put that on an agenda for the future, and come to us with I take it you've taken notes in terms of all the things that
I have.
we've talked about you need to sort of brief us on, and then we'll make our decision at that point.
Okay. Thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you, Christina.
Great. Next. Oh, the fun part of the meeting begins. 35 minutes late, but could be worse. Our tax classification public hearing. This is a public hearing and not a vote. We'll be taking a vote at our next meeting, which is going to be during town meeting. So
On the 18th.
not going to be, I have some restrictions, but
best dressed presenters tonight.
Pardon me?
So these are the best dressed presenters tonight.
Good evening. I'm Ted Costigan, the Chief Assessor. We have Dr. Harold Peterson with us. He's on our Board of Assessors, as is Mark Mazur, and is our Finance Director, Lincoln Heineman. We received approval from the Department of Revenue for our valuations. And so the next step before we can set a tax rate for the town is to get your input on the shift of the tax levy and the adoption of the residential exemption. So those are the two items before you, not to hear about today and then to vote on in 2 weeks. As a review, in the last 3 years, we maximized that shift from the residential class to the commercial class at that 1.75 shift. And we adopted a 20% residential exemption. So just our sort of year in review, many thanks to our assessing field team. They go out and do thousands of inspections in the field, picking up new growth for the town, as well as just cyclical reviews of property. That data, goes into our mass appraisal system, and then we make market adjustments. And that resulted in our residential class being up 2.7% in value this fiscal year, and commercial values based on our review of income and expense statements and using an income approach to value, up 0.5%. Our personal property, which I'll talk a little bit about more later, was up 4.9% for a total value increase of 2.5% across the town. Just to break it down a little further, our single family valuations went up 2.3%, which is a little actually under our condo average value change of 2.8, and 2 and 3 families, like in prior years, was lagging a little behind that. Apartments, even with increasing interest rates, we did see strong rents sort of outpace that from a valuation perspective. So we still saw a 3.7% increase in apartment average value, and our commercial on an average basis was up 1.4% per parcel. Our new growth, we're pretty similar to last year in new growth terms, except for our personal property was up from about $500,000 to $800,000. So that's about a $300,000 increase in revenues for the town. That is because our department decided to focus a little more on that and hire a firm called RRC, which helps us to identify personal property in our community and fairly and equitably tax it. So that was a big increase for us, which got us our highest new growth ever. So that's good at over 3.5 million. And where that comes in is, our levy from last year is 293 million, roughly. We obviously are allowed to increase that levy by Proposition 2.5. That's about 7.3 million. Our new growth comes in, which is certified by the Department of Revenue at 3.5 million. So our new levy limit would be 303.9 million. We do have a debt exclusion, as you know about, as you voted for, which is 28.5 million. The difference this year is the new debt that was issued for the fire stations and the Pierce School. So our total allowable maximum levy, 332.57 million, which now brings us to just a quick reminder on the residential exemption, how we calculate that. About 9,700 parcels in the town of Brookline receive a residential exemption. The way we determine that is taking the total residential value. We divide it by the number of total residential parcels to get that average residential value. In years past, the select board selected 20%. So 20% of that figure is 354,000, which gets taken off the value of each parcel that's eligible. So just next slide, last year that was worth about $3,400 to resident occupants in Brookline. And in this year, if we do choose the 20% and the maximum shift, it would be about $3,600 in the residential exemption. So here's where your choice comes into play. This option here is at the 20% residential exemption at the maximum residential shift. So again, shifting the most allowable by state law to our commercial class. That's that far left option in the bar chart. it's a pretty tight spread when it comes to the percent change in the median tax bill. So at the higher end, this option, multifamilies would be experiencing a little over a 6% total bill tax change, whereas commercial would be just under 4%. As we lower the shift, obviously that pushes up the tax change for our residential properties and brings it down for commercial. So for instance, if we went to the 1.7 shift as opposed to 1.75, the commercial properties would only see about a 1% tax bill increase, whereas the apartment class would be at a 7%. We derive that for all of these options, just noting that 79% of our single families do receive the residential exemption, about 51% of condos. Again, these are the nominal options here in blue. 63% of our two families receive the residential exemption, and 31% of our three families. Again, the options in blue and our multifamily tax increase there, all reflected in the bar chart. And this is sort of how, for people who are inclined mathematically, this is how we derive it, the tax rate. So if we were to select the maximum shift and the 20% residential exemption, it would result in a tax rate of $10.24 on the residential, and the commercial, industrial, personal property would have a $17.16 tax. That would be, if you just look rate over rate, it would be about a 3.6 or 3.7% tax rate increase for the commercial and the residential this year. Another option would be a 19% residential exemption. So we're just dropping that by 1% on the residential exemption percentage. It has a significant effect on our condo parcels. They would go again from an increase of around 5%. It would jump it up to over 8.5% just by that 1% change in the residential exemption. And we sort of show you the math that goes into that. I won't take too much time on that. We offer a 21% residential exemption. Doing that would drop the condo tax bill increase from about 5.5% to 2%, while pushing up the tax bill on our apartment class over 7%. And so kind of open up to questions, but that's kind of the question before you, is that, that maximum shift at 1.75, and then at what the residential exemption that we want to have for the town this year.
Oh, thank you. This is so hard. So I just want to talk about that residential exemption, that 1% change, and just to help me understand in the audience, when you reduce the residential exemption from 20% to 19%, the reason why condos go up is because they're getting less of an abatement, right? A less reduction on their taxable value.
Exactly.
So there's some, I assume, and there's a floor, right? Is there a minimum that they have to pay if?
Yeah, they have to pay 10%. So
10%.
Yep.
So there's fewer condo owners who are getting that 10% minimum. And that's why that number jumps up. Is that correct?
It's more that the average condo value with the residential exemption is around $500,000.
Okay.
So it's the total value would be like 880,000. But when you give them the Res X, it's about 500. So reducing that Res X has more of an effect on the bill that they pay. So, instead of getting 350,000 in the residential exemption, let's say they get 320, that 30,000, it has a bigger effect percentage wise.
And do we know owner occupancy, residential versus condo versus single families?
Yep. 51% of our condo parcels receive the residential exemption, and 79% of our single families receive the residential exemption.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Offhand, do you know how many, or can you recite the number of how many communities in Massachusetts apply a residential exemption?
I don't have the number offhand. It's roughly, Harold, 18.
18 out of 350, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, one.
18 that don't or do?
That
Do.
do have the,
Yeah.
yeah.
So just, it's important context because, you know, it's possible for conversations on this topic to make people very angry very quickly, depending on, you know, if you discuss a variable like the 19% versus the 20% exemption. And yes, if we were to embark on that in this year, it would impact condo owners in a way that is far in excess of what the impact on the other classes of property owners would be. On the other hand, it might have a little bit, a very little bit of a mitigating effect on other classes of property owners, depending on whether we're talking about apartments or single families or two families or three families. The real question to me is with an exemption, whether it's 19, 20, or 21, do we get unpredictable outcomes because of the nature of how you calculate what the exemption would be, which in the case of Brookline, it turns out to be something always, you know, from properties at the lower end
The vast majority of those are low income affordable condos.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's important to recognize too. And that's kind of a special case. But it's also the case that some of those properties have very light tax bills because they're valued low to begin with, right? So, you know, you could take a property that under other circumstances would be valued at, you know, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, and instead it's valued at like $250,000. And then you get, you know, a minimum tax of on 10% of that. Is that basically how it be calculated?
Well, no, if it had a $600,000 value and went down to 300,000, it would pay tax on the 300,000. The only time it goes, you know, below 10 is if, you know, the condo was valued at 300,000 and there was a $350,000, you know, dollar exemption. We can't do that. We'd have to be, they'd have to have a $30,000 taxable value
Yeah.
in that
yeah.
example.
Yeah. But you know, just even taking that example, you know, how low can a individual's property tax go in Brookline? You know, have you seen individual annual tax bills of $1,000 or less?
Yes.
Okay. And yet at the higher end, as we all know, would be paying and you don't like to be in the position of suddenly making someone else's taxes go higher, especially if it's a low income person. But I do hope we come to grips over time with this issue of how much disparity do we find to be acceptable in the range of, you know, the amount of taxes one pays on one's property versus the value of that property. And if some people are, you know, paying 10 times the amount that other people are paying in terms of how much of the value of their property they're paying taxes on, we might want to take a look at it. Even people who are living in, qualify for some of these subsidized, some of the subsidized housing, if you look at the thresholds, you know, they can be making over $100,000 a year or over $120,000 a year in some instances. So I think it's fair to sort of try to evaluate from time to time. And I'm not going to make any proposals for change this year, but I think we should maybe have a fresh look at, with fresh eyes through some sort of a specially appointed committee at what has happened to our tax base over time as a result of subsidization on the one hand of housing, and then on the other hand, this exemption policy, which only 18 communities in all of Massachusetts have, which heavily favors people whose properties are valued low. And the same people who are subsidies are the people whose properties are valued low in many instances. That's all. End of speech.
Michael.
First of all, one question of clarification. If you are those two behavior in the context of as these numbers shift, then single families is primarily a factor, is primarily caused by the fact that most single family homes are more valuable than most condos.
Yeah, we're modeling that graph based on the median value. So the median value of condos is a lot lower.
Is a lot lower.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, for me personally, I think that kind of division makes an artificial distinction between condos and single family homeowners. What we are really talking about is less valuable properties and more valuable properties. And to your point, John, about looking at who benefits from the exemption, I think it's fair to say that anybody who can claim 350 or 360 or whatever the exemption is from their personal property gets a fixed benefit from that. But given that properties have different values, right, the effect of that exemption is just to make our property taxes more progressive, because since that amount is fixed, the larger, the more expensive and the more valuable properties pay a larger percentage of their taxes, which is by definition more progressive. So like you, I'm not proposing any changes. I just think that we should frame it as a matter of being progressive. I would also be interested in knowing, of those 8 communities, what percentage of the actual population of Massachusetts that encompasses, because if it encompasses places like Boston or Cambridge or other large communities, then it's really not just 18 out of 351, but how of the 6 or 7 million population of Massachusetts are.
Well,
I just want to challenge one thing that you said, Michael, that the fixed nature is progressive. The tax is not progressive because it doesn't consider income. So someone who lives and has minimal income in a large home because they've been in it for 60 years, their ability to pay may be substantially less than someone who's living in a 800 square foot condo. So the problem, I think part of the challenge, and we're not going to, there's very little that we can do here, right? It should be, I've always thought it should be proportionate based on value. So it's not fixed, it should be some percentage of the value of the property is a residential exemption versus a fixed amount. The fixed nature, I think, is what creates inequality. But there's only 2 levers we have. We have the shift. I think we've always taken the maximum shift. We should talk about that if we want to change that. And then the residential exemption. The response from the community to make a dramatic change in residential exemption would be, I think, profound. I went to my son's lacrosse game the other day, and I was seeked out immediately on the field. I was trying to be incognito with a hat on, and I got my ear chewed off about this very subject for an extensive period of time for someone who feels that they actually misunderstood quite a bit about how this gets done because it's very complicated, but their taxes have doubled in like 5 or 6 years. So I would caution us to be very careful about making dramatic changes here. This is a terrible system for how we have to fund our municipality. And I would hope that the state would address this at some point in the future. I'm not going to hold my breath.
Another question. You know, if it's not already obvious, this is one of my favorite topics, and I apologize for taking up more than my share of time, perhaps. I'm very interested just to hear your thoughts on our commercial base right now, because if people are following developments in other communities, they may have been aware that in both Boston and Cambridge, there's quite the lively debate going on right now over how much burden the commercial sector should bear. And in both Boston and in Cambridge, it's going up 22% increase in commercial tax, you know, the commercial tax burden through this shift that we are allowed to use to sort of favor residential properties over commercial properties. That was done, I'll just take the Cambridge example again, to adjust for what was a, you know, unanticipated decline in their commercial base, because properties went begging that they thought were going to be filled. And so in other words, there's a 22% hike in commercial taxes, but it's largely intended to prevent the total deterioration of the revenue from the commercial tax base. It's not necessarily producing a lot more commercial tax income. It's just kind of keeping even with what the commercial tax income had been in the past, so that not too much has to be made up on residential properties. Is that situation likely to develop in Brookline, or not likely at all?
Yeah, last week I talked to the Cambridge commercial assessor, and you know, they have exposure to lab space and large office, which we don't really have here. That was the main driver in. It was a 22% increase in the tax rate, but that was caused by a decline in value. So their actual tax will, you know, be about, let's say 10% increased on the commercial side. I don't see that here. We have a steady commercial tax base at this time. You know, retail did better than office this year. Office was definitely flat. We are monitoring any sales that happen, but we're more monitoring the income and expense statements that we get to see the net income of these properties, to make sure that, you know, there's still, you know, low vacancy, you know, for the area. And I don't see that right now in what I'm seeing.
And what I'm seeing is, and this is based on your numbers in your pie chart, that commercial accounted for 8% last year, and it's going to count for 8% this year. And does that assume that we keep the shift at 1.75 or 7.495 or something like that?
Yeah. So we have commercial, industrial, personal property at roughly 9%. When we shift it, it goes to about, like you said, 16, 17%. And it's not really changing year to year very much, about 0.2% change.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? So give us a briefing on what we're going to be voting on next week or next meeting.
Yep, you're going to be voting on selecting that residential factor, which I'll have on the screen for you, which means that we are, you know, shifting at the maximum, assuming with a 1.75, and the percentage residential exemption, which I can have a number of options worked up, but
So in terms of the residential factor, we're just going to come up with a number, right? I mean, the percentage.
minimum allowable residential factor. Yep. So it would be the minimum allowable residential factor, which would allow us to shift the maximum to commercial.
But then we have to decide on the residential exemption percentage. So
Yep.
20%, 19%.
Exactly.
16%.
Exactly.
That's the easy part.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a public, I'm sorry, Chaz?
Just one quick question. Can you also comment on the availability of exemptions and tax work-off programs for senior citizens and veterans in town?
Yes, absolutely. That's in one of your tabs, tab 1, actually. It's at the back of tab 1. So we have low-income seniors that can avail of a personal exemption by state law, and we've doubled it here in Brookline, as you may be aware, at our town meeting. The legally blind can avail of an exemption, as can wounded veterans. We also have a CPA exemption, which, it's only 1% of the property value, but nonetheless, we allow a CPA exemption in Brookline, as well as a senior work-off program where seniors over the age of 60 can apply to work in a town office.
And the CPA exemption is based on age over 65, right?
There actually are a number of both the elderly and non-elderly would be possibly eligible for that. It's means tested. Yep.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Charlie, can you open up the public hearing for us?
Sure thing. This is a public hearing. Attendees may use the raise the hand feature if you're online, or may raise your hand if you're in the audience in the room to let us know if you'd like to speak. As per usual, we ask you state your precinct number, address, and name before you go, and you'll have 3 minutes. Anyone in the room? We have 16 participants online.
No.
Yeah, we have 16 participants online, and no one is raising their hand to speak.
That's not unusual. Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Any further questions or discussion from the board?
I have two questions. One, how do we communicate the senior programs or low-income programs?
I mean, the assessor's office always sends out with the tax bill.
It goes in the tax bill. Okay. And then, I find that this subject it's very complicated for us. It's very complicated and misunderstood by the community. Is there some way to include, or do we already do that, an explanation as to how the taxes are calculated?
I mean, it's an area where we've actually been doing some work on this, and I want to let Lincoln talk a bit about, community education.
Lincoln Heidemann, the town's director of finance. So to your first question, Paul, so in addition, one of the things that we've been working on in the finance department, and particularly the assessors, is to try and get the word out, make sure everyone who does know about knows about exemptions in other different ways. So we've been going out to the farmers market, going out and making sure we have a big presence at Brookline Day, and rethinking how the flyers might look. And so Chaz mentioned that's something that we've spoken with Christina Metcalf, the town's communications officer, to try and work through next year how we might better explain how the tax rate is set. There is a way that that Cambridge explains it that I think some people find a little simpler. It is complex regardless.
Yeah.
But it's something we're thinking about for next year.
It would be really helpful to have something even in the tax bill that explains how is your tax bill calculated?
Yeah.
With some background information as how the tax rate's determined, what goes into the bill, how their assessment is determined, the valuation of their property is another thing, that's just clearly misunderstood on how this gets done. Anyway, it would be really helpful.
Well, well, one other factor, I think a lot of that might be separate from the tax bill for two sometimes difficult reasons, but they are what they are. One is that the state very strictly regulates how the tax bill looks. The tax bill is almost identical in every single one of the 351 municipalities in Massachusetts. And the other thing is that if we were to do, we have done inserts in the past. If we do have an insert, the board would need to approve it, and it does have a not insignificant cost. So it's something we can think about, but just be aware of those two factors.
Yeah, when we're drawing 330 something million out of the town, I think we could spend that cost to educate them. Yeah.
Hey, John.
May I just one more? So it's too bad that there weren't any people who, weighed in tonight, but that's kind of understandable. This is a real, techie sort of topic. I want to take one last stab at making it a little bit simpler for people, and that is to advise people who have listened and are interested that there is the document that was presented on slides at this meeting is available in the agenda. It's attached to the agenda for tonight's select board meeting. And if people would go to page 20 of the document, they will see a chart that gives you the picture if we were to add, increase the residential exemption to 21%. And to further simplify this, I would just suggest that people look at only the leftmost part of the graph, because that's the likely CIP shift that we're going to use. 1.749, 1.75 is probably where we will stay. And so that's in the leftmost part of the graph on page 20. That's if we increase the residential exemption to 21%. And what you will see there is how the various classes of property would be impacted: commercial, multi-unit, 3-family, 2-family, condo, and single family. Then if you go to page 25, and may I suggest that we should probably keep these three things together, and also give each one a page so that the other two aren't distorted. But on page 25, you'll find a people in mostly rental apartments should be advised that they're probably going to be the hardest hit in the next round of taxes, insofar as those taxes go through to their rents, because under both the 19, excuse me, under both the 21 and the 20% exemption, you'll see on the charts that they are the hardest hit. That's end of my comments.
Okay, with that, I would urge select board members, if they have any questions or clarifications that they want to contact Ted Costigan, and he'll help us work through them. And at our next meeting, we will hopefully be ready to make some decisions. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Committee is proposed amendment that would carve out the smaller section of the parcel CRM2 from the zoning and proceed only with CRM1. There will also potentially be changes following that from the planning board version. So Kara's recommendation to you is that you hold off on taking this up, understanding that it would then have to come out in a supplemental report. But given the state of the zoning currently, best to hold off for now.
Okay, does anyone have an objection to that?
I don't have an objection. I had a question about just timing. So do we have a sense of when this would be taken up at town meeting? Because we would be voting, the next time we meet is the first night of town meeting.
Yeah, we may
assume-
we may need to put an extra meeting on the calendar.
Okay.
Probably an afternoon meeting on a Friday
Okay.
or a Thursday, just to get material out
Okay.
next week.
Okay.
Which we have done in the past when we need to, get reports out.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you. I see Mr. Allen, Jeffrey Allen, that who represents the developer that has put forward this warrant article. Should we have any objection to?
He's a petitioner. We usually let petitioners speak.
Okay,
Mhm.
go to the mic.
Amendment that's being discussed downstairs, because that wasn't given, that amendment was given birth to that amendment after we had our hearing before you. And I think that amendment is extremely problematic. And that is because, quite simply, it will most likely result in the loss of units. In that right now we are at a point where we have 33 what we call workforce housing units and 6 units protected by the inclusionary zoning for a total of 39 units, 4 of which are on C. Schedule will be number 26. So I'm not sure that this would, CMR2 would go through another public zoning process. That's not likely. We understand the concerns with CMR2, that it's only a massing study now and people don't have their arms around what it would really look like. We understand that. And that's why when you hear about the cleaning up of the proposal tomorrow morning before the planning board, one change we've made, I think, is extremely significant. We've made CMR2 subject to a special permit for design review by the planning board. We think that CMR2 should be designed in conjunction with the planning board, and we don't believe it should be designed by the advisory committee, the advisory subcommittee, the select board, or town meeting. The proper place to do, and the only concern with CMR2 we've heard is the design and how it's going to be laid out. And I think we think that's the proper province of the planning board, who have done 30, 40, 50 unit buildings. And we made it subject to a design review special permit before the planning board and then ultimately the ZBA to meet the legitimate concerns of people that say, well, we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how it's going to be laid out. So that's, I won't go back over the zoning, but we think it would be unfortunate if those units are lost because they're a little different than the units in CMR1. They would still be rentals, they'd still be workforce housing, but they'd be geared to maybe a family with one child or something like that, something that probably wouldn't be attracted to maybe some of them, but it'll be a townhouse approach. And we've done a massing study, which frankly, the planning board liked, and the planning board was unanimous in support. So I'd answer any questions if you have them. Otherwise, I leave it in your best judgment.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Jeff.
you. Thank you.
Okay, next, Article 8. Bylaw regarding nuisance light.
Yes, so there
Where
are
are we
a
at?
couple of updates there. As far as we know, the advisory subcommittee that's been hearing this has not taken a final vote yet, but I'm not aware of that they were still working on trying to incorporate some additional ideas for standards and enforcement. There is a revised version to incorporate, which you should obviously come on up and talk through if you'd like. The most recent version of your version, I know Paul Warren submitted a proposed amendment there. The planning board voted deadlocked 3-3 on an earlier version. They currently have no plans to take it up again. But I would welcome the petitioners to talk through where they are now. It's the Warren article.
David Titel, town meeting member, precinct 8. Thank you for the opportunity again to speak with you. I'm happy to go through all the changes since the last time we met at 11:30 Tuesday night last week. If that would be useful. If not, I can just go to a couple of real quick highlights. Which would you prefer?
Give us the highlights.
Quick highlights. Okay.
Unless someone else wants more detailed.
So the quick highlights. Michael, you had expressed some confusion with you had expressed that the language was confusing in the definition and applicability. We've changed that to now read, this section applies to outdoor lighting in residential areas originating from private residential properties, except for the following. So you were concerned about what the definition was, what didn't. Hopefully that has clarified things. We heard you loud and clear. Couple of things. We've added a definition of nuisance that came from recommendations from David Pollock and the Land Use Subcommittee. So we've added that. We sent it to the moderator. There were a couple of things that were out of scope, including the mention of local historical districts. So that's been stricken. And then, of course, we have the amendment that Paul Warren submitted that I saw today. We are open to that. And we're happy to hear more if you want to talk about it. But from our understanding, we saw what you suggested and we're completely open to that. So if that's included, that's fine.
David?
So a question I have in connection to the proposed amendment by Paul, I'm mostly in support of it. I think it helps to define more specifically what neighbor means. My one worry, though, is this is not only an issue about what a residence is potentially doing to another residence, but also potential impact on wildlife. So, for example, there are portions of Hall's Pond or of Horse Sanctuary that might not have a direct abutter who would have standing from the proposed definition in your amendment. So I would ask that perhaps we also include a provision that would allow for standing for the town itself and for Parks and Recreation Commission, because otherwise I think there's the unintended loophole of open space not being protected by anybody.
No, I think that's, so David, I think you raised a good point, yeah.
So that's my main concern. So I would like to see standing explicitly added for Parks and Recreation Commission and the town itself, so that someone is in a position to bring forward a complaint if one of our parks or open spaces are being impacted by nuisance lighting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a reasonable thing. I wonder if we actually need to change though, because in that case, the town would be the abutter, right?
So I asked Joe Callahan about this, and he indicated, and if he's on, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that he was saying the Attorney General would be the one in a position to defend open space. And to me, if absent any additional language, we would have to rely on the Attorney General. I don't know how long that would ever take to process, and I worry about that. It could be very cumbersome.
Yeah.
So I would rather explicitly provide standing for Parks and Recreation Commission and for the town itself to avoid that potential unintended pitfall.
Okay, is town council on?
He's down at the advisory committee, unfortunately. He's working with them. You have a double meeting tonight. But I can check in with him on this. I think given the state of where you are here, this is another one where you're gonna want to wait. But we can obviously have that conversation.
Yeah.
I do say just with the town, because there's enforcement language in here, the building commissioner is empowered to enforce this law. You know, it's just a question of who has a private right and who has, private notice and so forth. The building commissioner is permitted to independently ascertain violations of this.
Well, I think what David's speaking to, Mayor Bernard, is who has standing. Right. So basically I defined who has standing because it said neighbors.
Right.
And a neighbor, people send out emails to the entire town, dear neighbors. So the entire town is a neighbor.
Right.
So the question is, under the way it's currently modified, would the town have standing at Hall's Pond or, other places? The one worry I have is there'll be advocates. It's not just the town. There'll be all kinds of pressure being placed on town staff by residents who have an outcome in mind because they're not worried about the wildlife. They're actually worried about their own property because they abut, conservation land. I can think of one individual that probably would do that. And so I worry that we're creating an opportunity for people to just come out of the woodwork to complain about lighting. And that's one of the things I'm trying to prevent here.
And I appreciate that. So that's why I'm not suggesting that it be open-ended with neighbors. I agree. And I appreciate how you are more narrowly tailoring that.
Yeah.
But by the same token, and we have lots of open space, different pockets of town, that needs to be protected too. And I think a way to insulate your concern is by empowering the Parks and Recreation Commission or the town itself to bring about such complaints, not individuals,
Yeah.
but the commission and or the town.
So maybe propose some language for,
Right.
Yes, go ahead.
David, are you suggesting Parks and Rec and the town explicitly stated as both, or are you suggesting the town itself and that would be encompass Parks and Rec? I'm trying to think about as we draft changes to this. Or
Yes,
Paul, would
I
you-
think either way, as long as that's covered.
Okay.
I'm always leery of asking public bodies to be enforcers for civil violations. I think that puts Parks and Rec in a tough spot. You don't want to be accused of selective enforcement. You don't want a public body to be accused of selective enforcement. It's something we can talk about with town council, obviously, and the pros and cons.
Do you think mentioning the town?
The town, I think as it's currently drafted, the town, when I read the definition of a party in interest in the state law that Paul is borrowing from, the town of Brookline, I think, qualifies, generally speaking. We own the public roadways, we own, except for the land that the state owns. There may be some exceptions to that. So we may want to just say, to be safe, to cover, the town may independently bring an enforcement action.
I would feel more comfortable if that language were explicitly added.
Okay.
Oh,
so I have to admit, I did not go through every single change that you made. I think you've added some things.
I can,
Well, so, and so I'm going to add, if it's okay, I'm going to ask a question.
Sure,
So
of course.
for example, under 8.4A, it says outdoor lighting shall not flash, blink, or change in color.
That has not changed.
Okay, does that include holiday lights? So,
So holiday lighting is in F. So the point here is that holiday lighting is exempt until 10 p.m.
but so could it blink?
So if you go to 8.2, which lists the exemptions, 8.2D, you'll see that holiday lighting is exempt, except for the part in 8.4 where it says it needs to be shut off at 10 p.m.
Okay,
So blinking Christmas lights are fine until getting to the crux of what I think you're asking. Blinking Christmas lights would be fine until 10 p.m.
Okay, I was actually thinking about my Halloween dragon that changes color.
Also would be fine until 10 p.m.
Until 10 p.m.
Yes.
Why 10 p.m.?
Why 10
Why
p.m.?
not 11 or 1?
Excellent question. We wanted to draw a line in the sand somewhere. People go to bed at different times and whatnot, but 10 p.m. felt like a good median, like compromise time that felt reasonable. So that's where we landed. And the same is true for the back end of that with 6 a.m. Daylight savings and things like that. It gets dark, it gets light. We had to draw a line in the sand somewhere. So
thank you.
One more thing. Clint Richmond, town meeting member, precinct 6, co-petitioner. The idea.
wait, we speaking.
Approach the mic.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Clint Richmond, town meeting member, precinct 6, co-petitioner. The idea of time limits came from the planning department, right?
Yes, I believe that is correct. I do want to add one more point, which is through all of these changes, we've been in constant communication with Maria and planning and building commissioner, and everybody says the town is still willing to and able to enforce this. And that's a third rail for us. We don't want to put in any changes where the town no longer feels that they can enforce it. And we have received many suggestions from various parties that we have rejected as a group for that exact reason.
John.
Would the town itself be exempt from the provisions of this?
So the town is and commercial is.
Exempt.
Yes.
Would MBTA platforms be exempt?
It's government, I think is the
Well,
language.
we don't actually have jurisdiction as a town. Actually, Chaz nodding over the MBTA or the US government in any local enforcement.
Right. Yeah, I don't dispute that at all. It's just ironic that if the light weren't falling, on a Brookline household or bedroom window, there wouldn't even be an issue. And so in some sense, they've intruded on our, territory. But I get your point. This is, at this point, it's going forward as a general bylaw?
Correct.
Proposal.
And again, as
Okay.
as I stated last week, we feel strongly about that because we want it to be backward looking as well as forward looking, and to go zoning would only be forward looking and would not be able to take care of any people who have current issues that they would like to address. This is again about empowering the residents of Brookline to be able to complain, to bring up a nuisance of lighting, and to have know that the town has their back when they do. So we want to empower residents, and to do zoning it would only be looking
Yeah.
forward, which is unfortunate.
I'm far from the person to sort of know this as a matter of law, but there is this concept of grandfathering, which comes in, when laws change, and then you have to decide, should we, grandfather in? They obeyed the law at the time, but we've just changed. Have to change what they have for lighting?
So if I may, I have two things I'd like to say to that. The first is the technology, as I brought up last week, the technology of lighting has changed substantially. So it's not really an apples and apples conversation. This has really come to the fore because of the rise of LED lighting. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is that this bylaw has several safe harbors, if you will. One of which is changing light bulbs to a cooler temperature below 3000 Kelvin. One of which is shielding the lights. One of which is changing when they're on and when they're off if they're an issue. So there are several things. Motion detectors is another thing, depending on the fixture and the situation. But the point is, we've written this such that there are several safe harbors that are cheap or free to people who are the ones with lights that are being a nuisance. So this is not putting an
The alternative to this would be to neighbor who is easily annoyed by lighting, you're going to have to come into compliance with this. And if you don't, you're home free. So now we're putting in place a regime that's going to apply unequally all over the town.
So I personally do not see it that way. I see it in those who are affected for health reasons, for nuisance reasons, a light that's shining into their bedroom, a light that's shining into their kitchen, a light that's preventing them from watching a dark movie at night in their home. They're unable to enjoy their homes they're unable to sleep, they're unable to have and their health may be ill-affected from trespass light, they now have recourse and the town has their back. Yes, there are edge cases, and I'm not going to pretend that they're not. There is the chance that there is someone who is a rogue actor who is looking for a vendetta, who is going to complain because there is a light that is potentially problematic. That is where the building commissioner comes in. They can take the measurements. We've given them guidelines that they feel they can enforce to see if that light is indeed problematic. And if it is indeed problematic, then it will, then it needs to be replaced or there will be penalties. But again, if your neighbor doesn't care, then it's not a nuisance. This is for the people who are being affected. We are empowering them.
Yeah, I would just also add to your point, John, that right now in many contexts, when it comes to enforcement, they are complaint driven. So for example, we have noise nuisance bylaw, and someone might be bothered by a loud party next door and someone else might not be. That's not
a light is shining into their bedroom window, they currently have no protection and therefore need this law to protect them. We already protect people from certain types of nuisance lighting. And I know because I've worked with people to get enforcement against lighting that was intrusive in bedrooms or you name it, under our current law. And so we're taking the current law to a different level. And correct me if I'm wrong, we're saying certain types of light bulbs are no longer going to be allowed in Brookline. And they could well be light bulbs that a lot of people have in place. And we won't know how many have them in place until people start complaining against their neighbors.
So two responses. The first is the current laws have to do with signage, which are fuzzy at best to be able to.
And health.
Yes.
We have a public health provision.
Yes.
That if your sleep is disturbed by, somebody's light, you can ask for a health inspector
Which,
to come out.
Sure. Which doesn't affect, for example, living rooms or kitchens or other parts of your home. So that's thing number one. Thing number two about the type of light bulb. Again, we are not banning light bulbs in Brookline. We're not banning 5,000 K light bulbs in Brookline. What we are saying is if there is a high temperature bulb that is creating a nuisance, that one bulb in that one instance needs to be replaced. That is very different from banning bulbs in Brookline. It is a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And it is absolutely complaint-driven. That is an excellent point that David made. It is a complaint-driven nuisance bylaw.
And the light bulb doesn't have to be replaced. You can have a 5,000 K light bulb. You just have to shield it and keep it in your property.
Michael?
First of all, I want to commend you for your sort of efforts to find a solution here. My most substantial concern, and it doesn't sound like a concern that is really addressable for the reasons that you state, is the advice that we've gotten from town council that this is either illegal or will be rejected. And I'm concerned about putting the town through that process to that end. The second question I have, which sort of illustrates that point, is in the section 8.xx.5.1 under enforcement, where I believe there's a section E exception that talks about for new structures, substantially rehabilitated structures, and newly installed outdoor lighting fixtures and luminaires, compliance shall be immediate. And I guess my question is, if you are trying to structure this bylaw to take into account a complaint on a particular instance, why are you putting in exceptions that sort of point to sort of how that particular license nuisance was created? Because that, in my mind, sort of just points to sort of a bypass around the requiring this to be a zoning provision.
Sure. Let me answer both of your questions. First, regarding the legality, our understanding is that the town council has brought this up to the attorney general, and we're waiting to hear from them.
Okay.
So I believe that is still pending. And I have not heard back about it. So we're still waiting. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my
Okay,
understanding.
so we're still in a holding pattern there. Then there was the question. It is an open question. You have received letters stating other legal opinions as to whether or not town council's interpretation is the correct one. That's really where you land personally on, what interpretation you have. But regardless, the attorney general will theoretically settle that. Getting to your question of why is 5.1E in there and what is it trying to do? Honestly, it's about nipping things in the bud from the start. The idea here is we know what is apt to cause nuisance. So we're trying to prevent new construction from doing it in the first place. Let's not have construction built with a 5,000 K bulb that is just unshielded and shining into all the yards that before we're dark, and into all the homes that were before we're dark. So it's really about getting ahead of things, if you will.
Right. I guess I would just say in all of the other cases where we try to get ahead of things in new construction, most of those things are written into our zoning code.
Sure. And you're right. This is not zoning for the reasons that I explained before. But the idea is that we still want to try to get ahead of things. This is our attempt to do that.
Yeah, let me ask a question. You do allow seasonal holiday decorative lighting, but only up to 10 a.m. or
10 p.m.
p.m. I'm sorry. What about lights on trees? A couple of years ago, we got some really we had a lot of upset residents who wanted us to bring back lighted trees, mainly around town hall, which is not a residential area. But I'm thinking about those trees, which are, I really enjoy them, on Beacon Street in residential areas of Beacon Street. So why would you, how can you, well, I guess the question is, why would you want to ban that type of holiday decoration?
I don't think we are. What is your interpretation? Forgive me, but
having them shut off at 10 p.m.
we're having them shut off at 10 p.m., but
Right.
we're not, what?
I think Bernard's saying, why not?
You want them on at 2 a.m? Is that what you're asking?
Why not? I mean, that's what we've done.
And the answer is what we are proposing here is that we're trying to, this is a little bit of a dark sky issue. This is a little bit of an environmental issue, trying to lessen the amount of light.
Yeah.
This is of course a nuisance bylaw as well.
So
Primarily.
no one cares.
So-
No, it's no
But
problem.
if it's on municipal property, it's not covered by this bylaw. So you can put them on until 2 a.m. or leave them on all night.
Hmm.
So
Although some of these
what's
trees
the
are
case
on
you're
private
objecting?
property.
There are some people who want to put these wrap their tree, I guess, on private property. That's a different issue.
David.
Also, it's about residential areas. So if it's a commercial area or if it's a municipal property, then it's fine.
Yeah, but the areas of Beacon Street where you have these lights on private property. So, I mean, that's just me. I think that's, kind of unreasonable to ban that.
Yeah.
Paul?
And I kind of agree with that. It's holiday lights. It's temporary. Maybe this article is trying to be too many things. It's trying to be a nuisance. It's trying to be dark skies. It's trying to be health. I mean, nuisance and health go along, but you're starting to bleed into dark skies. So maybe I would encourage you to consider that, shutting off holiday lights at 10 p.m. you know, it's just, it's a festive time of year. Lights are on. I mean, these aren't, you know, I mean, I guess if someone could complain that it's too bright and the complaint would work and say, well, you've got lights up there that are higher than whatever the
So,
And
so
it's a
remember,
issue too.
so remember, someone can leave their lights on past 10 p.m. This is not banning lights after
Yeah.
10 p.m. It's saying if someone is aggrieved by that, they have standing after 10 p.m. Now, to Bernard's point, if you go to 8.2a, exemptions include public monuments and public properties. So if those trees are public property, it's moot.
Yeah, I'm thinking of trees on private property.
Yeah, so trees on private properties would be like housing lights as well. And if someone is bothered by it,
Yeah.
after 10 p.m., they would then have cause. But again, there's safe harbors in here of light trespass
Yeah.
and amount of brightness. We've got the foot candle measurement in there as well. If it's a dim, festive light that isn't trespassing and isn't problematic, then there's no cause. Then the building commissioner comes.
Unless you get a grudge against your neighbor.
But even so, even so, then Dan comes, he sees it's not an issue, it's moot.
Yeah.
So
But that's not the point that I actually wanted. I wanted to raise it differently. I was supporting Bernard. But I can't see it becoming an issue for neighbor on neighbor complaints. You know, fences make good neighbors. You know, bad bylaws make bad neighbors. But I do want to raise the issue that I brought up I brought it up last time. I brought it up at EDAB last night, and I'll bring it up again, that commercial's not included in this. And I know this isn't your doing. But I'm really concerned about this because I can kind of understand the front of commercial because it may need some more work. But if it's the back of commercial where the big spotlights are, on all night long for parking lots. And when you're in mixed use, I mean, I live this every day. So I know I look right down St. Mary's Court from the condo building all the way down to St. Mary's Street, all the businesses and mixed use in between. And it's lit up like Logan Airport. And this bylaw is not covering any of that. I did send a question to the building commissioner. I haven't heard back yet as to how is that lighting regulated? And I'm hoping to get a response on that to understand. You know, I will give you an example. There's a new business being taken over. They're going to be opening up soon. It's commercial. And they had put up these LED bright spotlights on the back of over their door. There were some people coming in, trespassing, spray painting and stuff. So they put up lighting. And I assume a camera. Well, it was very bright and it was pointing right at my son's window. I did the neighborly thing and just talked to him and said, hey, and immediately they just turned them down and it did solve the problem. But there's other lights that are 25 feet in the air, 30 feet in the air that you can't do that with. And they're just too bright. So I'm concerned, and I don't see the path to resolution for dealing with those residential properties that abut business districts on the backside being impacted by lighting. And I don't understand how that's going to be solved. So Chaz, maybe we could encourage the building commissioner to get that.
I've reached out.
Okay.
We'll talk. Yeah.
Okay, we're not taking this up tonight either. So any other discussion? If not, let's move on to the next exciting warrant article.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very much. So next on your agenda is Article 9,
Yep.
the renter's handbook. You've got the clean language from the petitioner in there, the most recent versions. You have a letter from one of our current constables talking about the bylaw, Joe Figler. You have a proposed amendment from Select Board Member Warren. And you have memos generally in support or, in discussing this kind of, the application of this bylaw from ODEICR and the Health Department.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to take Paul's motion since that's.
I like Paul's
I'm
motion.
sorry, where's Paul's motion?
It's in the packet. It's
letter
called
was-
Warren motion, Warren Article 9. I mean, my motion. I took the feedback from the board and I drafted the motion. So
Yeah, why don't you
I did.
summarize them? It's fairly
Yeah,
straightforward.
so, basically what the amendment does, and there's I thought I wrote an explanation. See if I can find it here. Essentially, the amendment removes the requirement that town agents, including constables hired by landlords, deliver the statement of tenants' rights and resources when serving a notice to quit. So it took that section out completely. It does preserve the intent of the original article, ensuring that tenants have access to clear information. The town will continue to publish the statement on the website as if this article were to pass. The town would keep it updated, make it publicly available, but the proposed change is based on, three primary considerations, which I think we discussed last week. The state already requires similar information. Matter of fact, one of the constables sent me the form that they deliver when they give a notice, and it includes a link to the state website that includes robust information about programs and rights and, ways to stay in your home, how to get help. So there's a tremendous amount of information already available. So, that information needs to be already out there by those that deliver it. And, there could be a concern that, well, maybe ours is in conflict with that material already is. Using a Brookline-based constable when they there's a risk that they're just not going to use our town's service agents, Brookline-based agents. And then the third issue that we did hear from Joe Figler last week or the week before, that when a notice of quit is challenged in court, they will potentially be called in to court to defend their position. Did they provide the right information? Did they deliver it properly? Was the information not up to date? Was it inconsistent with the state? And that would be time that they're paid per diem. So they would get paid for that material. And I'm also told that although the risk may be minimal, it is possible that the town could be taking on having to do legal defense, because now we're using our agents to deliver specific information, and so we're taking on that responsibility. So this amendment, very simple. Was the main petitioner the one as the vast majority of landlords don't use Brookline constables. They're using Boston or somebody else, which again kind of even reinforces that this information is not being delivered by our constables anyway.
Okay, we haven't gotten.
I believe we're
back.
back online now. We
Okay.
promote Chichi. I think Kate's doing that now. Oh, Charlie has to do it.
Yep,
Sorry.
I've just promoted Chi-Chi.
Hi there. That was an ordeal to get on. Chi Wu, town meeting member, precinct 7. Hopefully the internet will hold up. I'm here to speak on this warrant article since Alec Leibowitz is in a session of advisory council that he couldn't miss. So I'm speaking as the co-petitioner. We decided to do some research in light of the concerns expressed by board members at the last meeting. We talked to a housing attorney who represents tenants at a Boston area legal services agency. So he told us that with respect to the other municipal ordinances that require a similar statement of rights, such as Boston and Somerville, he sees pretty much widespread compliance with it, indicating that landlords don't find it especially burdensome. In fact, he said he's not aware of a single instance where the failure to provide the local notice result in a dismissal or adverse ruling. And he also said, to the extent if there's non-compliance with a local notice requirement, it's very likely the landlord's not going to comply with the state required disclosures or other mandatory notices. We also did some quick research. He showed us how to go on mass courts and look up Brookline eviction actions. We took a look at September, which apparently is a very busy month for evictions, but there were only 9 in Brookline. One appears to be a duplicate. Of these, Brookline constables served the notice to quit in 4 cases. Other persons served the notice in 4 cases. And in one case, it wasn't clear because filed the wrong notice to quit for a different case. So in 2 of the 4 cases where someone other than a Brookline constable served the notice to quit was 61 pages and 65 pages long, respectively. In comparison, the notice to quit served by the Brookline constables were about 4 or 5 pages long, which kind of gives you an indication that including an additional page or 2 in the package isn't really going to be something that deters a landlord from using a Brookline constable. And by the way, we looked through those two 60-page plus packets, and in them, the notice to quit actually included a Boston mandated statement of rights. So the noticing agents actually included a local statement, but for the wrong municipality. So to directly address the 3 reasons cited to support striking warrant Article 9's requirement to have town agents, including constables, deliver the Brookline Statement of Rights, the state already requires some disclosures. Well, the state mandated disclosure, as Alec has mentioned before, provides information and resources that are available on a statewide level. A local statement of rights would provide information on Brookline-based resources, such as the Brookline Community Development Center's Corporation's Rental Assistance Fund. The concern that as drafted, the bylaw would discourage the use of Brookline-based agents. The information that we just provided indicates that landlords really wouldn't see the requirement to add a page or 2 to the notice to quit package as burdensome. And the concern that Brookline constables and agents be required to participate in court proceedings without compensation. As I just mentioned, if a notice to quit is deficient because it doesn't include a Brookline notice, it's probably likely deficient for other reasons, such as the failure to provide the state mandated notice, or in one case we just saw in the 9 that we reviewed, filing the wrong notice to quit for the wrong tenant. So it's highly unlikely that the Brookline notice itself would be the sole reason that it's to quit is challenged. Finally, this housing attorney noted that we don't have a huge number of evictions filed in Brookline. There is an alternative that could require the town, a bylaw that requires the town through its Office of Housing Stability to check the mass court record every week, like we did in researching this, and mail the statement of tenants to tenants who have an eviction filed against them.
Okay, more work for you, yes. Michael, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. So first of all, thank you, Chi-Chi, for providing that context. That was actually one of my questions, is like how prevalent a problem this is. And it's clear that there are, if September is a large month, then we're talking about 9. I mean, even if it were that much, then we're talking about some maybe 100 per year, but I assume the number is significantly less. The question I'm asking is, given all of this, whether, since this is a part of a Brookline bylaw to introduce this requirement that it be delivered, whether or not we can put some language into the bylaw instead of striking this to deal with the risks that Paul has raised, whether we can put in some language that basically says that the failure to deliver this publication shall not be justification for avoiding the notice to quit. So that we're just basically saying that the town may be obligating the agents to supply this, but that obligation does not extend a right to the tenant to use that as a matter of voiding the notice to quit. Because I presume that would be the concern of the landlords. In general, I think, we're balancing the needs of agents here with the needs of the tenants. And the whole point of this warrant article is to provide a necessary service to tenants. So I would hate to compromise that in that particular trade-off. But if we remove that risk, then I think both parties can move forward effectively.
Question is this a necessary thing for tenants? I mean, the information's on our website. It's already, some of it's already provided to tenants.
Yeah. I guess I am concerned that just using the websites or the internet is insufficient notice for tenants who are struggling in a number of ways and may lack quick or effective internet access.
Well, and also by the time this notice is given, it's really kind of too late. They're being evicted. So, David?
So I agree with you, Michael, that just posting something on the internet is not sufficient. So my concern is not so much with the merits and intent behind the proposal. I certainly want tenants to be apprised of their rights and potential opportunities they have to avoid eviction. It's more the delivery component I'm worried about. And I understand and respect your explanation, Ms. Wu. My concern is more not so much about adding 2 pages to a 4-page packet, but whether landlords in Brookline will have a disincentive in utilizing our Brookline constables. And yes, maybe it's only 9 a month at most, but even so, that's giving our constables less business than they would otherwise have. It's creating a requirement for one class of process servers that we wouldn't have with any others. And I'm interested to hear more about an alternative that I suppose you technically aren't proposing, but that you laid out just now, where the town could scan who has been served notices to quit and directly mail the local tenants' rights and resources. That would be another mechanism by which tenants receive the same information without potentially disadvantaging our constables. So I guess one question for you would be whether you think that alternative mechanism could be workable for this bylaw. And then a question for Chaz, whether you think that would bear a significant expense or would be essentially the same as this proposal where constables have to deliver it.
So with respect to whether it's workable at this moment, I would be concerned if we tried to amend the warrant article at the point. It would be considered out of scope. We'd have to do it in the next town meeting. I would say in terms of, incentives in selecting a constable, I mean, what we heard from this experienced housing attorney is that the selection of who to serve the notice to quit is usually more dependent on the relationship between the attorney, the landlord, and whoever they usually use to serve the notice to quit. And that sometimes they use a constable from another municipality or someone else is because that's the firm or the outfit that they use in multiple municipalities to serve the notice to quit. And it wouldn't have much to do with an extra piece of paper.
John, did you?
Yeah, thank you. But Chaz, you
No, go ahead,
want,
go ahead,
want
and
something?
I'll-
Okay. I don't know whether people regard this as a historical footnote that doesn't really pertain, or maybe as something more than just that. But I want to note that in 2022, after trying out a method of cutting back on the amount of printing that was done in advance of town meetings, and the tryout method was that people could opt out of receiving a meeting, in which case they would access obviously the online materials. And the decision, I think a very wise decision, which I actually spoke at town meeting and advocated for, that was approved by town meeting by a vote of 219 to 8, was to change opt out to opt in to excuse me, to receive a printed version. So in other words, 219 members of town meeting said it probably makes more sense for the default method of delivery of our combined reports to our town meeting members in advance of town meeting is not print, it is online. If anyone, for whatever reason, wants a printed version of our materials for town meeting, we guarantee them that they can opt in to receive a printed version. I don't know what the latest data is on how many people actually opt in to receive the printed version. I honor them and respect them, but I think their number is quite small. So I'm not sure how the idea that was so widely favored in 2022 suddenly is being turned on its head. And I must say, by at least in one case, one of the people who was a lead advocate for moving away from printed versions of materials for town meeting, now being the advocate for a cumbersome method of delivering printed materials to not to both tenants and landlords, but tenants who at the time of a delivery of an eviction, excuse me, a notice to quit. But I think Paul's proposed amendment is very wise, and I've already, sort of made up my mind. I think it's something I could support.
May I address this issue of
Yes.
paper versus electronic, please?
Yes.
I'm a consumer advocate, and one of the things that we do try to support is paper versions for populations that need them. And the population of town meeting members is different from the population of folks facing eviction. First of all, you have the email addresses for all the town meeting members. The population facing eviction often are quite vulnerable. Of those 9 cases, I believe 5 or 6 of them either involve tenants at Street Inn, at the Brookline Housing Authority, or at Caritas Community. So, these are folks maybe with potentially, lower education levels, literacy ability, reading ability, ability to function, potential disabilities, or they could also be older folks. And so the fallback should always be paper. These are also folks who may be on the other side of the digital divide, or if they have any internet access, it is in the form of a phone and not a full laptop. And it's very hard to see these notices on a screen. So I would say, that while some populations can be perfectly fine with electronic delivery, the folks who are facing eviction may not be amongst them.
Chaz.
David, I'm sorry, could you repeat your question now?
Just in terms of the financial ramifications of having the town check who is being served notices to quit and mailing directly to these individuals.
I don't even know how we would do that, to be honest with you.
Well, going on mass courts, and you can look up who's in housing court, it would probably be take up a significant amount of time. I acknowledge that, but in terms of the financial elements in undertaking that strategy as opposed to mandating constables to deliver?
I wouldn't recommend that. I think given like that's an unfunded mandate. It's just, who do we have that would do that? Our resource navigator, like that person, as you can see from John Krasinski's memo on this, even though we're the health department is supportive of this because of the housing issues, the priorities of our resource navigator are broader than this. And we've got to be working on those, getting that off the ground. It's the same thing that we see with climate action and priorities. It's the same thing we see with tree protection and priorities. If we keep getting told, you've got to do this one thing, and we don't have the staff for it, we don't have we get costly unfunded mandates, then the things that people, I think, really do want us to do, if they stop and think about it, which is build out a functioning human services division and make that happen. If we keep getting thrown, side quests in that effort, I don't think that makes sense. So I think the petitioners have come up with a solution that they think works in terms of the body that, the local authorities that are already doing this work are doing it. I just can't imagine. I mean, I can imagine, unfortunately, but I can also imagine the cost, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of time of the people involved in this. And it's not that this isn't a worthy endeavor. It is, but it's just, is this the highest and best use of the time of the staff that are being asked to rebuild human services capacity that's lacking in the community? And I think the answer to that, unfortunately, is no.
All right. So
Actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
is that another question? So another question I have, will raise concerns about the
I'm terribly sorry, but the internet is glitching again.
We know, Chi-Chi, we have Big working on it. We're not really sure what
Okay.
the issue is.
Sorry, I just can't hear if
No,
they're
it's
asking
okay.
me a question.
David, you want to try again?
Yes. In your conversations with the housing attorney, did you learn whether there are any efforts afoot in cities that have passed ordinances requiring that the landlord provide this notice, that there are any efforts to challenge that legally?
He has not seen any challenges. As I said, he sees widespread compliance. So when he's defending tenants, he sees that the notices are provided, and that there hasn't been any dismissals or adverse ruling, but for failure to serve the Boston or Somerville notice.
Okay. Joe Figler has his hand up. I want to let him come in. Charlie, could you promote Joe Figler?
You've got it.
Okay. Hey, Joe?
You've been promoted.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh, all right.
Yep.
So, Chi-Chi has brought up a number of different things. So, I mean, I'll just try to touch on some of them, as well as I think David had mentioned something else. So let me start by to David's point about sending out from, a Brookline department notices to quit, or the tenant information after a notice to quit. So you're not going to see the notice to quit on that website that Chi-Chi referenced until a summary process is filed. So at that point in time, it's going to be, you're looking at probably a month to a month and a half after the fact. So if you're sending out like the tenant information based off of the notice to quit that you see on that, at the housing court website, it's going to be pretty far down the line. Hopefully you just heard that, but it looks like things are cutting in and out.
Yeah, we heard it.
Okay. One thing that was brought up is in terms of compliance with Boston. I would, again, I'm not a lawyer, so take that for a grain of salt. But what I did do is I called the Boston Housing Stability Department, and I simply asked, what happens if someone doesn't include the tenant information? right? What happens if the landlord doesn't? And what's going to happen is that they're going to get fined, right? The first time, they say, all right, don't do it again. But if the landlord continues to do this over and over, they're going to get fined, and they're going to get fined per day of noncompliance, right? And that leads to another question: what are we going to do in Brookline if people don't comply? That's just something to think about. I don't know if we're equipped to do anything, or if it's reasonable for us to do something. But if we're not going to ensure compliance, I don't know what the point would be. But in terms of, so to give an idea of how much notices to quit I've served in Brookline over just this year, I've served year to date about 157. Right? So break that down over 10 months, it's roughly 15 notices to quit a month on average, right? And that doesn't include, what the Boston people are doing. It doesn't include what Neil's doing. I don't know about the other Brookline constables, but, so that's going to give you a ballpark as to how many notices to quit are being served in Brookline. Chi-Chi mentioned how some landlords include the tenant information from Boston, which is true, because I have clients who've done that as well. But I think they do it simply because they don't know the difference. And I don't think it's intentionally them trying to be good citizens. I think they just don't know the process and they just include them anyway. But I don't think if it's not included that the case would be thrown out, because I don't think it's necessarily a court requirement. But I think the issue, if you don't include it, is you get fined.
So may I follow up on that?
Yeah. Just
Um,
very quickly.
So in terms of fines, our warrant article does not include fines. I believe the Boston Office of Housing Stability does have the authority to impose fines. For example, landlords are required to register. I actually had to do that for my in-laws, where my in-laws live in it. And you have to register, and you don't, they can fine you, but they have the authority to do that. That doesn't exist here. And then just in terms of the numbers, I would note that not all notices to quit result in summary process or an eviction. So you could have 150 notices to quit and only some of them result in an eviction filing, which is the difference in the numbers.
Thank you.
And a summary process is not an eviction. Right? That's just the next step in the process. There's a lot more to go before you get to an eviction.
Okay, Paul, are you
Yeah,
ready to make a motion?
Yep. So again, based on, unless the board has moved from where it was last week, I move Article 9 as amended
As amended by,
by me
okay.
for you.
Well, we were only dealing with one amendment.
Yeah.
At a time, so.
Yep.
Any questions?
So a quick summary of the impact of that amendment on the article. If you
So what it does is it eliminates the section that requires town agents to deliver the renter's handbook.
Yep.
I think that's the name of it, but I may not be exactly right. During the notification.
But on the other hand, it does require that there be a statement, right?
There's still the handbook is still developed. It's still maintained on the website. It's published on the website.
And it's made available to the.
And I think there's printed copies that are available in town hall and wherever, but we've eliminated the responsibility of constables essentially of delivering it.
Yeah.
Michael?
So I just want to be clear as to what the motion is. First of all, you're proposing an amendment. Am I correct that this amendment is not accepted by the petitioners? So this is not a.
Doesn't sound like it.
I'm sorry.
It is not accepted by the
It
petitioners.
doesn't sound like it.
Okay, it's not accepted by the petitioners. So you're recommending favorable action.
Well, he's first amending the warrant article. And I guess we amend and then we vote.
Yeah.
The warrant article as amended.
Right,
Two-step
it's-
process.
Right, it's you're proposing whether or not the select board will endorse an amended version. Whether the select board will endorse the amended version, and then you take a vote on whether or not the article, as with the proposed amendment, is accepted, will be recommended for favorable action or no action.
Okay, so I move the Paul Warren amendment to warrant article
9.
nine.
9.
It's not as late as last time, but it's still late. Warrant article 9, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
David Perlman,
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein,
No.
and chair votes aye. Okay, next. Yes, David.
I just want to make very clear with my vote, I am supportive of tenants receiving this notice and this handbook. I think it's critically important that they receive it. I am a little skeptical, frankly, that they're going to be able to know by some means to check a website or to check town hall. So I acknowledge that this amendment does somewhat hollow out the broader intention of this Warren article. But by the same token, I don't want to be supporting something that I don't think is utilizing the most effective mechanism. We just heard from Constable Figler that he has served, I believe it was 157, and he's just one process server of many in Brookline. So it's probably a very large number of people who find themselves in this situation. And this Warren article, as currently constructed, essentially would be only mandating that Brookline constables deliver this, and that would be a very small percentage. So I don't think that's as effective as requiring that the landlord provide this information, no matter who the landlord selects as a constable. So my opposition to this and support for the amendment is not rooted in thinking that this is not a valuable endeavor. It's that I think that the current language does not actually meet your actual goal in terms of reaching the broader number of tenants who would benefit from this. And I think the way to do that is require the landlord to deliver it. And yes, we heard the opinion of town council. I respect town council's concerns, but as you mentioned, you're not aware of any challenges to similar ordinances in other communities. And I guess I'm just a bit less risk averse than town council when it comes to being a little more cutting edge in some of our proposals. So I would like to see this come back at a future town meeting where the mandate's on the landlord.
May I respond, Mr. Perlman? We normally aren't shy about challenging town council, but to have the attorney general opine that this is not something a municipality can do and harm Boston and Somerville is not something we want to take the risk. We will be back though, and the next warrant, if our version does not pass town meeting, we will be back and we will have the town do it. We will make the town check the records. That will be the next warrant article, that the town will be required to check the mass courts every week and send this out.
Okay, we'll
Just
take
to be
that
clear.
threat. Okay, so
I hope you find money in the budget for that. Because I'm already having to cut money from the budget for vital services. It's so frustrating.
vital social services.
Frustrating to hear again and again that, oh, you can find the money for it. We can't. We're in the middle of cutting the budget. My gosh.
Okay, we have an amendment, an amended warrant article on the floor. We've accepted the amendment. All in favor of warrant article 9 as amended, please indicate by saying aye. Might be
Recommending
Favorable.
recommending favorable.
I'm sorry, yeah,
action.
favorable action on the amended warrant article 9. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
David Perlman,
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Thank you. Thank you, Chi-Chi. Okay, with that, our meeting is
No,
over.
you've got one more warrant article.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, my notes are out of date.
Sorry, you have one more warrant article. Sorry, let me pull up the
15.
Yeah, 15, which is the LGBTQ.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What changed?
There's there were just technical small changes. So we wanted you to take the vote again, conform with to just reconfirm that you're conforming with advisory's version of it.
Okay, and what were those changes?
Hold on, I'm pulling it now. Don't have a red line, but let me look at the report here briefly. There was a new whereas clause that was proposed from the chair of the Human Services Subcommittee, noting that other municipalities recognize June as LGBTQIA plus Pride Month. The subcommittee proposed to remove the original seventh therefore clause, which resolved town meeting recognized various occasions beyond the official Pride Month celebration. And so, but the moderator ruled that and then there was a proposed change to resolve clause 8 that the moderator found was out of scope. So with that amendment, there are now, right, so it recognizes Pride Month and it urges the select board to officially acknowledge the Transgender Day of Viability, the International Day Against Homophobia, Stonewall Riots Anniversary, Coming Out Day, Transgender Day of Remembrance.
Jess, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So there's a red line version in the AC Human Services Subcommittee report.
Yes.
Is that what we're voting on?
Looking at it now. Yes.
It looks like, number 7, it says that the town meeting urges the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to officially acknowledge.
But I understand that was ruled out of scope.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so what?
The removal of clause 7 with the additional commemorations, that's been removed. That list that I just read was recommended for removal. And then, but then the additional whereas clause was added, and then there are a couple of small changes. Town meeting urges the town of Brookline to recognize. Town meeting urges the people of Brookline. So it's some clarifying language, but other than that.
Okay. Anyone have any questions or objections to voting this article as amended? I mean, the changes don't seem to me, at any rate, to be substantial or really substantive, right?
No.
The one that the moderator had rejected was. but-
Yeah. Okay, I move approval of warrant article 15 as amended. All in favor? Not approval.
Favorable action.
Favorable action. On warrant article.
Oh, you have to make a vote to reconsider. Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I move reconsideration of warrant article 15. All in favor? John Vanskoyak.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
I think I have to abstain because I wasn't involved in the original.
Okay. Chair votes aye. So now let's take up warrant article 15 as amended. All in favor, please. Not
Favorable action.
sorry. I move favorable action on warrant article 15 as amended. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Vanskoyak.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, with that, unless there's anyone in the audience wanting to make a post-meeting comment, seeing no one raising a hand in the audience, anyone online, Charlie?
Sure. If anyone would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand at this time. We
Okay,
have
hearing
13
none.
participants and no one is indicating they'd like to speak.
Okay, Michael?
Here, I think that my comment before about not being eligible to reconsider was a hangover from last May. So I don't think that.
Not from last night.
I was going to say, I thought you were here, but.
Oh, I was. It's just that happened routinely in last May. So I can change that vote from an abstain to an aye if
Okay,
that's possible.
so change. Okay. Okay, with that.